And we're now very pleased to be joined by Congressman Tim Bishop, who serves on a number of congressional caucuses, including the House Democratic Caucus and the House National Service Caucus. Congressman, thanks a lot for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Happy to be on. Thank you.
Well, I know you're just back from D.C., and before we get to some of the items on the national landscape, closer to home, I know you've been involved in trying to hopefully mitigate here some kind of resolution with the MTA and the union. Are you hopeful there's going to be a deal done here now that they know Congress won't step in before next Sunday?
I'm very hopeful. I thought what happened yesterday was productive, not as productive as it needs to be, but I think the fact that they spent 5 hours at the table, the union made a substantive counterproposal that the MTA is considering. I think that's all positive. What I must say I am discouraged by, troubled by, is that there is no other session scheduled yet to carry forward. And I and several of my colleagues from Long Island have just called upon the MTA and the unions to stay at the table throughout the weekend and negotiate a contract. And if they've got to stay there 24/7 between now and Saturday the 19th, then that's what they got to do, because the strike is unacceptable. And I think the parties are not that far apart, but they need to be in a room, they need to be at a table, they need to be exchanging proposals, and they need to be settling this contract.
And there's no exaggeration of the dislocation of so many people, especially from your district and throughout the island, that they'd be looking at come the 20th. Okay, let me talk to you, ask you rather, about in Washington where we are, and more specifically with the back and forth on the subject of immigration. First off, the optics of it, then we'll get to the substance of it. If the president asked you your opinion, would you have told him either don't go to Texas and do the fundraisers, or if you're there, go to the border? Should the president have handled this differently? Because it's not just Republicans that have criticized his handling of it to this point.
In my opinion, the president should have, while he was in Texas, should have gone to the border. That is just my opinion. But I think optics are important, and I think the president visiting the border would have demonstrated to the people of Texas and to the people of the American people that this is a crisis that he is fully immersed in and is determined to solve. Now, I do believe that he's fully immersed in it, and I do believe he's determined to solve it. I just think the optics of it would have been improved had he gone to the border himself.
Because it's a midterm year, and lately just because it's Washington, obviously all the fingers are getting pointed in all the directions, but Speaker Boehner made it pretty clear he believes this is the president's problem, saying in part, this is a problem of the president's own making. He's been president for 5.5 years. When is he going to take responsibility for something? Without digging too deep, can we just explain to the audience that basically the legislation that made a distinction between Mexicans who cross the border and people from Honduras, Salvador, and some of the countries south of that, that happened under the last administration, and people have been trying for a while here to actually get at the table with immigration reform, and a lot of the same folks criticizing today are the same ones who don't want to even have a dialogue on it.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much framed it quite accurately. Let me say a couple things. Number one, I think the Speaker Boehner comment represents the height of hypocrisy. The Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform in June of 2013. Speaker Boehner has pronounced that bill dead on arrival, quote unquote, and has refused to bring any, and I mean any, legislation to the floor that would deal in any way, shape, manner, or form with fixing a problem that all of us agree needs to be fixed. So for the Speaker to criticize the President and say that it is his policies that have led us to the point where we are today is both A, factually wrong, and B, hypocritical in that he, Speaker Boehner, and the rest of the Republican leadership in the House are the ones that are standing between the current situation and solving the problem with the bill that the Senate passed. And everybody recognizes that. Now, going back to the larger issue of the humanitarian crisis that is on the border right now, you are quite right to point out that the law that is being followed right now, and in fact the law that is being used by some as a lure to get these kids to come to the United States with the illusion that they'll be able to stay here, is a law that was passed in 2008, passed by what's called unanimous consent in the Senate. In other words, everyone agreed, and passed by voice vote in the House. In other words, everyone agreed. And it was signed into law by President Bush. The law says that kids who come into this country unaccompanied by an adult from countries other than Mexico or Canada are entitled to a deportation hearing before they can be deported. That's what's happening right now. And the reason the president has asked for $3.7 billion is to both harden the border, which is crucial, to house and feed these kids, which is, I think, our humanitarian obligation, but importantly, to bring more resources to the border in terms of immigration judges and others to process this vast number of kids who are showing up. And that is simply to follow the law that was signed into law by President Bush. So this is not a problem that President Obama created. I think it's clear that the administration, the current administration, was late to the table in terms of solving this problem, but to say that this problem was created by President Obama is pure political posturing, and frankly, we deserve better right now than pure political posturing.
At the end of the day, does the House approve the funding?
I think we have to. Now, clearly, it's not going to be approved in the form in which the president requested it. The Republicans will put their own stamp on it as it goes through the House, and perhaps the Democrats will want to modify it as well. But look, this is a crisis that requires a response, and that response is going to cost money. And whether we want to spend the money or not, we have no choice but to spend the money to fix the problem. And as I say, we've got to harden the border beyond what we've already done, and we've got to have in place assets that allow us to process these kids, and we also have to have in place some ability to house them and feed them while they're still here. I mean, that's fundamental to who we are as a country.
Listen, we've always heard people talking about impeaching the president, but it's not just the Sarah Palins and the fringe who are saying it. You've got a lot of people we're not talking about suing the president, including, again, the speaker who says that he's basically rewriting the law to fit his own needs. He's making laws on his own here. He's taking executive power and basically using it on steroids. Talk about a lawsuit right now, and really the idea, and I think I speak for a lot of people, that we're just resigned that Washington can't get anything done because it's so flippin' polarized.
Well, I think the Speaker's lawsuit is a political stunt, and frankly, the American people deserve better. They sent us to Washington to solve problems. They didn't send us to Washington to engage in the kind of gridlock and the kind of dysfunction and the kind of paralysis that we've had in the House of Representatives under Speaker Boehner's leadership. That's simply a fact. And the American people deserve better from us. There are any number of problems that require congressional action to solve. And whether it's the immigration problem or whether it's the fact that the Highway Trust Fund is about to run out of money and 700,000 construction workers could conceivably be thrown out of work, or whether it's the fact that we've got 3.5 million people who are eligible for long-term unemployment compensation, but the House is blocking an extension of that, or whether it's the fact that we've got 16 million people that could be lifted out of poverty if we increase the minimum wage. These are all problems that require good faith action to solve. And what this Congress is engaged in under the leadership of Speaker Boehner is suing the president. Suing the president isn't going to put a single person back to work. It's not going to prevent a single person from entering this country without proper authorization. It's not going to stabilize the finances of a single middle-class family. It's not going to send a single middle-class kid to college. We need to do the work that the American people sent us to Congress to do, and Speaker Boehner is refusing to do that, and he's spending his time suing the president. I think it's an outrage.
Well, Congressman, I wish you luck on a lot of fronts. Let's hope we got no strike here on the LIRR, and let's also hope that maybe some sanity can come back to Washington. Thanks again for the time.
I hope so, too, and thank you for having me on.